I do not know what this machine is, but boy does it look expensive. I'm just kidding, I know exactly what that is. It's a tile plow. But expensive is the right description for it. I stopped and checked in on that, and it is a can of worms for a whole nother video. We're cutting soybeans today. We'll worry about that in another day. Yes, I am quite literally in a different pickup truck than I was 5 seconds ago. This is Dad's truck. We did a switcheroo. That big self-propelled plow installs drainage pipe that looks something like that black spool right there. To give you guys a little bit of foreshadowing, we've decided to invest a little bit more money in drainage projects across the farm. Plenty of oil. The unfortunate reality is that our drainage contractor is probably going to be running while we're harvesting a lot of our fields. They're going to be off in other places installing some of that subsurface drainage pipe, so we won't get to witness all of the action. I will do my best to make that happen though. I think Marty already serviced this draper. Looks like it. We still have yet to get the yield figured out on that S670. Brian from Untitled Tractor told us that either we are missing an elevator paddle, which is what brings the grain up from the threshing system into the grain tank auger, or our mass flow sensor is bad, which is the sensor that really recognizes how much grain is getting thrown against it, and it kind of inputs based on the elevator speed and a few other metrics what the yield of the crop is. Good morning, sunshine. One of those elevator paddles missing can cause the yield monitor to go haywire, because yield calculations for a combine are a very complex system of multiple metrics that all have to come together to calculate what the estimated yield is on the machine. It's not just a little scale in there that balances up and down and says this is what your crop's making. No, harvesting width matters, harvesting speed matters, elevator speed matters, grain quantity against the mass flow sensor matters, temperature matters, moisture matters. There's so many different things that go into calculating instant yield on the display, which is why troubleshooting this is kind of troublesome. Marty should be here for this draper pretty soon. 780, spent the night at the fuel tank. It is ridiculous how much fuel that 13.5 liter engine can use. Now that combine can cover a lot of acres. Those really high yielding enlist beans we cut yesterday were kind of taxing on our fuel tank. We were running 2 gallons an acre of diesel fuel to bring that soybean crop off the field. I highly doubt that Marty serviced this one, seeing as it was on the ground. All the fields we've cut though since the last service are relatively rock free. So, looks like there's nothing it's gonna need. Sickles or guards, good to go. I would tell you that it's our lucky morning because our heads are in great shape. However, we have some issues at that tile project. Some news we weren't expecting with the main we're trying to tie our laterals into. Having a little bit extra residue in it than is optimal for drainage systems. We're just gonna worry about the yield monitor today. That's our goal this morning. We're gonna check these elevator paddles. We're running the separator though to make sure all the grain is out of that elevator system, so when we open it up we don't dump a bunch of soybeans. Marty volunteered his tribute to pop open that shield and see if we're missing any paddles. I'm really hoping it's the paddles because that is a significantly cheaper fix than a mass flow sensor. Quoted one this morning, about $2,000 for that sensor. Hello?
On and then off.
On and off, okay.
Oh, wait till stop. Now do it again, just like that.
Were there any missing?
Didn't see any. There's a couple wide gaps where the chains connect.
We're gonna ask the experts. $2,000 later and we're halfway to having the yield monitor calibrated. Does that look like $2,000 to you? Well, it is John Deere green, so wouldn't expect it to be cheap. Goes right where that handle is. That elevator throws the grain up against that paddle as part of the yield sensing equation. We might have considered putting it on ourselves, but they told us that it requires some kind of fancy laptop calibration that is above our pay grade, so we have a tractor tech from Untitled Tractor on the way. Speaking of tile, a gift that keeps on giving. New tile costs a lot of money, Old tile leaves a lot of holes. We're sampling beans already. I would guess by the amount of backing up and going forward and backing up and reversing the separator and head that the beans are still a little tough. I should clarify, the separator does not reverse unless you do it manually. The head is what's reversing in the feeder house. That way it can unclog whatever's not going through the drum. I would say they're too tough. Just in time, Lions tractor's here. Typical soybean harvest. Waiting on them to dry. Boss is trying to cut another sample. Not going well. We're eventually just gonna have to go ahead and shove them through because the entire labor force is sitting here at the field waiting. Depending on how you view it, I do have some more bad news for you. That new mass flow sensor did not fix the problem. The technician said that maybe we've got some kind of a software glitch or some other unknown issue that he's not worked with before, and he's extremely experienced with combines. So he's opening up a support case with the dealer technical support system from Deere, where they have a much more widespread knowledge base of combine issues. So hopefully we can get that fixed. Might as well flag another tile hole. He made it one through, so I'd say we're gonna be cutting here. The issue with soybeans in the morning is not necessarily the pods. You can see those are breaking open, meaning that they thresh easy. As for the moisture of the soybeans themselves, already pretty dry in the 13 to 14% range, which is what we're looking for. It's the lower part of the plant that causes issues. There's a lot of residual moisture that builds up on the bottom of the stems and all this foliage on the lower area of the plants. That gives the cutter bar, the guards, and the reel a lot of challenges for these beans cutting efficiently, not dragging up under the draper at the front of the draper on the cutter section, and feeding incorrectly. If they start to drag up, we bring dirt in, we start to rip beans out of the ground as opposed to cutting them off, and that's not what you want to do. You especially do not want to run dirt through your machine if you can avoid it. I can still feel moisture in the bean stems themselves here on the ground. All this foliage has a lot of moisture. Obviously, something wet is not going to cut as well as something dry. The main reason I'm here is because we're having some issues, and I'm the tech guy. Or at least a cheaper tech guy than the John Deere mechanic. He gets more per hour than I do.
So he's flashing the turtle.
Oh, because you got it on reduced speed mode.
Who did that?
You would have. I wonder if there's a hotkey on here that does it. Control setup. One of those a turtle? A. Which one's A?
I have no idea.
Up here.
Yeah.
They added a lot of functionality to the hydrostat handle, but for a lot of people like that, it just becomes unnecessarily confusing.
Oh, big pile, big pile.
Katie's draper's cutting better than yours is. What's your hydroflex pressure at?
13.
No major issue, just operator error. It happens. Checking to make sure we're getting all the beans out. Got one bean there. That looks acceptable to me. That horn is the separator spinning warning. Operator out of seat. It's a lovely sound. And we're off. I'll be there by the time you're cut through, Dad. If you want to go ahead and dump on me on this south end and then cross that bridge and go cut the backside. Didn't get time to clean my windows this morning. Breaking my pledge this year, clean them all the time. It's time for our gamble of the day. We've got about 4 or 5 acres on the backside of a drainage ditch with a land bridge across it. Just a shifty little culvert in the middle and some dirt. It has a tendency to wash out. As long as the inside tires stay on it, we should be fine. This is actually not our corner of the field here. It's the neighbors. It's technically their bridge. They have to drive through all of our property to get to this little section. So they maintain the bridge, we maintain the lane. And it looks like we got some weeds on this field, unfortunately. I can think of a lot cheaper ways to mow the weeds down here. Though, not very many ways quite as convenient as just using the draper when you're crossing. First dump. No need to tarp it because it's just going up the road. Also resumed my chicken scratch weight note taking, so we know whose beans are going into the bin. Those are from the field yesterday that yielded extremely well. I've got those transferred to a hard copy. If you are not writing on your cab windows with dry erase markers, you're giving up a lot of valuable note-taking space. We're almost done with this field. the hill or the weight, but those duals, when they're squatting, are awfully close to touching. Oh, only a few green beans and pods in there. But hey, that's what the fan's for, right? That's why we're putting them in the grain bin. We can blow all that moisture out pretty quickly with some horsepower. We're gonna go ahead and try and cut some beans just a half mile to the east where Katie's combine's headed. They're both just gonna trot down the lane there. While they do that, we're gonna dump these last few beans off onto this semi. Dribble the last bit in here. Good shake, cut her off. I just did the calculations on this field. It was the same bean that we just cut yesterday that was super high yielding, the 35 T15Es, but on a completely different farm, different growing conditions. And realistically, we don't expect as much out of this field. It just does not seem to produce as good of soybeans. That being said, I've kind of alluded to what the yield's gonna be, lower than the last field. They made 72.2 bushels per acre dry yield. I shrunk down the bushels that I weighed out. They actually averaged 13.5%. I took a percent off just for extra room for error. I don't think we can be disappointed. 72.2 on this field is probably up there with a good average for what we're expecting. This field making 72 impresses me more than this field making 78. I actually was disappointed that this made 78. This is really good dirt. Like I said, I think those Asgrow 35XF1s suffered quite a bit from that sudden death syndrome. We're just sitting here on the east waiting for orders from the boss, who happens to be right there cutting a sample. We can do some research here on John Deere Operations Center. See me parked there in the 8R, Katie's S670, we're both paused because we're not moving. And Marty in the 780 doing 16.7 acres an hour, straight line efficiency. Hop in here, see what his display is showing. Beans are doing 13 to 14% moisture. Looks like we're gonna maybe push up to 15 real quick. No? I wouldn't put much faith in the yield monitor as of yet. That active yield does take a minute to kind of dial in. We're gonna get an up close view. Always gotta have my Midland radio on me when I walk out of the cab. That way, if I get in trouble for not doing something in the grain cart, what I should be doing, someone can radio me and tell me. I don't have an exact number on what they're testing. They do smell like they're going to cut. A lot drier than those beans we dove into yesterday. You can kind of sense moisture. You can smell it in the air. Wet beans and foliage just kind of have an aroma to them. Pods are popping open. Yep, those are gonna cut. Be looking for a new job. Hurrying as fast as I can. Nah, that's a half truth. I'm hurrying as fast as I feel like hurrying because it's too early in harvest season for me to get beat to death driving down the inrows in road gear. Might as well take my time when I can soybeans, and then once corn starts, all hell can break loose. That's fine. In traditional grain car driver fashion, I parked in the way. Oh, that's how we're doing this? You never know with these combines. Now it's the truck driver's turn to be in the way. Actually, I got plenty of room. I know we've already seen a glimpse of the yield monitor from checking in on my John Deere, but I will say that my predictions heading into this harvest had this field as one of our highest yield potential. So keep that in mind before we report our official bushels at the end of the day. The 780 already needs to dump again. That's a good sign for the yield of these beans. Moving slow and dumping often. That's what you want. I'm a busy little bee right now. A lot of loading and a lot of dumping, which ultimately means a lot of weight tracking for our poor grain cart driver. Oh, 49, 780. Would you believe me if I told you there was already software and hardware that exists to automate grain cart record keeping to make your grain cart operator's life easier and for cleaner field harvest records, yields, bushels, load management, everything you could imagine? Well, it does exist, and I happen to have one in my hand right here, courtesy of Libra cart by Agromatics. The Libra cart system is plug and play. All we got to do is unplug our Digistar scale lead into this. It'll sync with my iPad and it'll start to automatically keep track of the weight of the records. That way I don't have to continuously write everything down and run the risk of messing something up or getting carpal tunnel. I get next to no time at all in this field to talk because both combines are just chewing through 90 plus bushel beans. The wheels have to keep moving if we want to keep the combines running. I believe the boss hopped out to check and make sure he was getting all the beans threshed, not throwing them out the back end. As much as I'm sure some of you would like us to be spreading soybean cover crops out here, we would in fact like those beans in our grain tank, into the grain cart, into the semi truck, into the local bins, and then ultimately in our wallet. This is it. I'm cutting the cords. This is the last load I'm keeping track of. 3260 in blood red. And this box is bliss, happiness, ease of operation. Not ease of removal from box though. Unplug that, plug this in. I guess you're probably supposed to secure this somewhere, but we'll secure it there for now on the iPad.
JM 1222, unload detection, minimum load, done.
It took me a few minutes of getting the calibration numbers off of this display onto this. Everything's set up now. Should be pulling the same weight readings off of the grain cart that this display was because it's using the same factors, same numbers. So, should be good to go. Just finished a nice load on the semi. I didn't hit a single button over here on the iPad. Kept track of my dry weight outbound, 48,850. These two were me trying to figure the system out on my own. Not only is it keeping track of the weights, it's also synced with our John Deere Operations Center. It's pulled in all of our fields. So I've selected the field we're in, this 86-acre field we call Virginia Campbell's, and it's applying these pounds to that field, keeping everything batched based on field. I can batch it based on truck. I'm also keeping track of the fact that we're sending it to the north 36-foot grain bin at the big house, or Jeff's house. It's aptly been referred to as the big house for as long as I can remember because it was the big farmhouse on the hill. So thanks to the Libra cart system, everything is automated. It is keeping track of the bushels coming in and out. It's applying them to the right field. Now I do need to pay a little bit of attention to make sure we're still on the right field and all that jazz, but pretty much painless. Liking it so far. We'll stick with it for the afternoon. I'll tell you guys what I think here in a little bit. It's a fun time of day. My little farmhand just showed up. He loves a good tractor ride. Lenny, Marty says you're not allowed to clock in since you're not driving anything. Lenny, what do you think? Day 2 in the grain cart this season. No opinion yet? Say hi to the combine. Yeah, we gotta go catch him. Here another year or two, you can take over for me. Just enjoying some chicken nuggets in the cart. How it's meant to be. Everything's running great still. We're racing through these beans. For a 4.0 bean, which is pretty late for what we normally like to plant, they are dry. Look at the dust coming out of this combine right now. If the combine didn't tell you how dusty it was, my window definitely tells the story. The Libra cart system running flawlessly for us right now. Other than its placement, it's a little dangly right now. Keeping track of everything for me. Hands-free, haven't touched the marker since I got everything finalized with the install. Dry as a bone. These Asgrow 40XF1 Extend Flex soybeans are not disappointing at all. Cutting great, good bean size, a lot of dust. You don't win for cutting too dry of beans. You want to be right on the money. Their moisture fluctuates so rapidly though, you really can only do so much. In the 80s right now, which is pretty good. That means that we may actually break even out here on this field this year. There's one little patch in the corner, maybe an acre or two, that we're gonna have to leave behind, come back and get, just because there's still green pods on them. I don't know if that's because that's a waterlogged area or some kind of drainage issue in that corner. We have one more field of these 4.0 beans, but they're not going to cut today. They're across the road, planted a few days later, and on a very different farm, even though it's just right next to this one. Soil types can change very quickly, especially here on the glacial moraine, where all of that glacial till really changes pace because we're at the tip of the iceberg, literally. Now that right there is a good looking sample of beans. A couple of pods, but if it weighs, it pays. Doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra debris in there. Overall, big bean size, that goes a long way towards yield. Combines are emptying out. We're gonna unhook heads, find another field of dry beans to cut. With the sun shining, clear skies, pretty warm ambient temperature, 75 degrees, and a nice breeze outside, shouldn't be too difficult this time of year to find dry beans. Execution out of Marty. Dad and I are running up to the bin site, having some electrical issues. Spreader quit running, and the fan quit running, and also the drive over, which we're pulling a lot of power at once here. Yep, top right, Dad. There it goes on. Just flip the breaker. It can be hard to keep straight because all these bins were built in different phases, so you never know which breaker goes to where. This one feeds off of some of the middle bins. Some of the south bins feed off of the power directly. You never know. Everything's running though. That's good. Those are the best kind of troubleshooting trips. The quick ones. You solve it fast, you know it wasn't a major issue. Grandpa's picking corn. No, we're not just being nosy. We got a field of beans directly adjacent to them that we wanted to check. Coincidentally, we can be nosy in the process. Pioneer 35 T15E beans.
T26, aren't they?
T25. It's the 32s or 32 T26s. I don't know, these seed companies change their darn varieties and hybrids every year. Hard to keep straight.
Dry, aren't
13 to 14, I'd say. We found more beans to cut, so the equipment shuffle begins. Dad's gonna take his combine down the road. Katie's gonna take the draper. I'm gonna dump the grain off the grain cart back into this semi over here. And then the show will move on down the road for me too. There's not exactly a fixed strategy when we move equipment. Typically we have one goal. We want to get the main combine and its draper to the field because we want to ensure that the beans are gonna cut. Everything else is secondary. Here's the Libra cart scale head display. This right here, in combination with my iPad, has replaced our Digistar system. I do need to zero my scales out. It's been keeping track of all of our loads in and out. It's been basing it off of our John Deere Operations Center, so this bushels per acre is actually pretty light. You see, we've cut 405,000 pounds of beans, all weighed courtesy of the Libra cart. I guess I had a couple at the beginning that I had to manually input because I had not set the system up. All it takes to do an export is pulling up your field. That was the field that we just did. It's actually 86 acres. We're going to update that. Then we can export it, VC86. Every load, if you want to play with the moisture, you can. I just left it at a dry 13% because these beans were all very dry. Every single load I weighed out, the load of each individual one. Pretty sweet. We'll come back for you, combine, don't worry. That is our other field of those 40XF1 soybeans. Definitely not quite ready. It's a pretty short trip, only about 3 miles to the east of where we were just cutting. This is some good black dirt. Chris has caused a traffic jam by parking the draper in the way. Classic. I have no idea what is going on up here. They've switched red trucks out, now they got Dad's truck on the draper. I'm very confused. However, I'm not confused enough to be motivated to go out there and help. There's 3 of them over there. I'll enjoy the nice air-conditioned cab and massaging seats in this 8R tractor. They've solved the problem, whatever it is. The draper is now out of the way. I'm hoping that these 35 T15 Pioneer soybeans yield pretty close to what our first field of them did yesterday, running in the 80s to low 90s. Won't be disappointed with that. I don't have massive expectations for this field though. It is great dirt, but on the flip side of the coin, we mudded the crap out of this pulling the corn out last fall. You can actually still see tracks out here from where our Tract 780 last harvest mudded through here, loaded onto the cart, loaded into the field. It was just a mess through and through. There's definitely a lot of areas where we're seeing our choices from last fall show up in this year's yield monitor. My dad would tell you that he doesn't regret what we did one bit for the simple fact that we were picking 240 plus bushel corn at a minimum on almost all of our farms. And in his mind, you just cannot leave corn with those yields in the field for Mother Nature to work against. If that corn would have gone down and it would have stayed muddy, we would have had an even larger mess on our hands. Holy cow, that's a big hopper of soybeans. That is one grain tank full. Now he was stuffed to the top, but still, that's a lot of beans. Our beans have dried down substantially within the last 24 hours. This same variety was too wet up north, although it was yielding very high to take to commercial storage. We put them in our bin. These, though, we are going to end up taking to the elevator. Now, this first pass has a few green ones, some tree lines around the farm, so we are going to tuck those away in a safe spot on the semi truck. Then we're going to load them full, in and out, in and out. This other combine doesn't show up soon. The 780 is going to have this all cut. These beans kind of have a mahogany scent to them. It's an interesting aroma. Those of you who did not watch last fall's videos, you're new here, I highly recommend when you get some free time, popping back in the channel's history and seeing the kind of conditions we dealt with at the tail end of last year. Completely different than what we're harvesting in now. Although we are just getting our toes wet when it comes to harvest. Just in time for the party. Don't know why she did it that way. A little more. Now this is service. Well, it took me 20 minutes with Katie's help, but I did get it. Usually don't have any problem getting those hooked up in the first or second try. That one though was a beast from a completely different planet. I think I had to realign like 15 times. It gotten to the point though where I couldn't give up because I'd committed to myself to accomplishing hooking up that head. Should just got out of the seat and let Katie do her job. All that work and I still didn't get it on right. I wonder if some beans on the feeder house were causing the issue. It looks like she got it now. Just gonna take the L on that one. Not a successful hookup for me. We'll wait for Katie to grab the auto steer line and get out of the way so we can pull over and dump. Oh, joy. The sun is right at burn your eyeballs out level. We are next to a train track though, and I do know that some of my viewers enjoy a train or two. We'll throw the drone up, see if maybe we can catch a train. That right there is how you load a truck in the evening. Sun may be backing down, but the loads aren't. Also, I'm not even sure if a train even went by. That was my whole goal with that time lapse. I had my drone up for over an hour with 2 different batteries. If there was not a train, that's between you guys, Canadian National, and God. If you want to talk about being in limbo, I need to go move these Draper head carts around with my drone still finishing this time lapse. I don't want to sacrifice the time lapse, and I also don't want to get fired from my job. Reasonably, I brought the drone controller with me. That's the only logical thing to do. Just a tiny patch left for the combines. Whoever parked these Drapers needs a lesson in convenience. There goes combine number 2 to home base to get some fuel. Shut down. I get to sit here and wait for the semi to show back up so I can dump off what's left on the grain cart. Once said task is complete, then I can take the grain cart home. Easy peasy. It's a beautiful evening, so I don't mind waiting around here at the field. And I got a few things on my to-do list, like being a nice guy and tarping the truck for Jeff, and I need to take a leak because I've been holding that in for painfully long at this point. Make sure I don't get hit by a car. That'd be an unfortunate end to the evening, and probably my life. Here's the other truck, just in time. That'd be quiet. Car truck. Jeff showed up, so might as well dump what we got left. That wasn't even a half load, so that was a stress-free dump. I barely even paid attention. Not that I pay a ton of attention anyways. Gonna go ahead and put this in storage position because I will think myself tomorrow morning. Not moving it tonight though. Combines went in to top off their fuel tanks. I've not even used a quarter of a tank in the last couple days since I've filled up. No reason for me to waste the trip when our next field is closer to where I am right now than our actual home farm. My shovel's still on the back, that's always nice to see. We always like to pull them away from the road, keep them faced away from the road. That way when we leave them overnight, there's less chance of someone getting adventurous coming out here and messing with them. I'm gonna give you guys a final opinion on the Libra cart system, you know, maybe towards the end of harvest after I filled a lot of trucks with it. Based on my first few hours of running this on a couple fields, it has expedited my record keeping, and it has also taken a little bit of stress off my shoulders because it automatically keeps an eye on the fluctuation in weight. Once that fluctuation dips below what it would consider a minimum load, which we have set to 1,000 pounds, it takes the previous data that it was already watching, then couples it with what continues to go out and gets you your full outbound load weight. And it does a phenomenal job of doing that. The Digistar system worked fine. I always had to hit the start and stop, or I had to write down an in weight and an out weight. I have to keep track of things on the window. It just gets cumbersome. As long as you have the right acres in the system, you do all the jazz you normally do. You cut beans, you load the grain cart, you load the trucks. When you get all said and done, as long as you have the acres on your field set right, you get the yield. In this case, we're showing 73 bushels per acre. One thing that I really like is the ability to export all the loads from a field via email to the email address of your choice. That way, they're all recorded. You can have a PDF copy somewhere. I mean, this is just a godsend for me as the cart operator. You've treated us well this evening, grain cart. Thank you. I also should mention, I did verify my calibration. The first load we hauled out of this field to the elevator, those are official weight scales. I showed 48,730 in and out, automatically recorded by the Libra scale system. Actual was 48,640. I know the light just came off on me. That is a difference of 70 pounds. 70 pounds, everyone? That is 1 bushel and a little bit of another one on an entire load. An 800 bushel load. We were off on 1 bushel. That's good. It's been a great evening of soybean cutting. Look at that Midwestern hazy post-sunset view. Beautiful John Deere tractor J&M grain cart. What a night. I was curious why Jeff took so long to get back. He told me right before I loaded him in this truck, or right when I met him when he got back, that he was there for an hour waiting on a line of like 30 trucks. That's harvest season for you. Let's get this load home. Everyone who lives next to the farm has to get used to the sound of the fans running. In this case, on that north 36-foot bean bin, we're wanting to keep air moving through all of those wet beans we put in there. Airflow helps dry them down and keeps them from spoiling. Not that it's really that big of a concern at 14%, 15%, because those are kind of dry at the end of the day, but helps us get peace of mind, sells the beans out a little bit, and ultimately keeps our quality. While we're on the topic of quality, there's not any rain in the forecast, so I'd venture to say that you're going to see me again tomorrow, bright and early, with some awesome action-packed harvesting content. I do greatly appreciate all of you tuning in. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!